Supervisor Brandow, under Public Health, retroactively approve the Director of Public Health's previous submittal of the California Resilience Challenge 2020 Grant Program, proposal and application to the California Resilience Challenge, and authorize the Chairman to execute grant award agreement.
Hi, David. And so could you really quickly go over this item for us, and then I'll have a couple questions.
Morning, Board. David Lucchini, Director of your Department of Public Health. This item is really our first attempt to start doing an assessment of what some of the climate impacts to the health of our vulnerable populations. We haven't done much work in this area. We probably don't have a lot of knowledge, and so this is kind of our first step to do an assessment of some of our vulnerable populations, especially in the rural area, and start assessing, comparing, and contrasting with other studies that are being conducted at this time. We know there's a study from some organizations working in the city of Fresno. State has been working on some studies, and we anticipate, based on what the discussion is, there's going to be money coming down for climate impacts. And so this is really a good first small step. It's not a large grant. It's not a game changer, so it's really focused on assessment and really starting to build up our knowledge base on this. This will help fund part of our health educator to start building up some knowledge. Also would help our EPI team to start focusing on some of this data, creating a dashboard and some maps so it can kind of visualize some of the areas we need to prioritize when money does come down from the state or even the feds. I don't know if that's, you want more?
No, I think that's a good start. And so I have a couple questions,
Yep.
and then my colleagues will probably have their own thoughts as well. So who controls the study? Who does the study?
Yeah, we do the study. We'll probably be assigning,
You put the
awarding
study together?
CBOs. No, it's
You-
not with the state of California.
Okay, all right. So you run the study, but the study's, the questions, everything that's going to be studied.
So we have a good partnership that we're working with UCSF, Fresno, that's that Forte that we talk about in the item. UC Merced, Fresno Madera Medical Society, Public Health Institute, all focus on help us putting together some of the questions we'll need as we do town hall calls and surveys with some of these vulnerable populations in the rural areas.
Okay. And then who's going to determine the outcomes of the study and as far as what should be done?
What should be done, it'll just be a vulnerability assessment. So it'll just prioritize of some of the areas we need to look at. So there's no implementation type items in this.
Okay.
It's like I said, it's too small of a grant. It's not a,
Right, yeah.
it's a one small step. So it's really
No, I
focused
get
on
it,
assessment
totally, yeah.
and building up that knowledge. Because
An
you guys hear
assessment
me
of what?
say enough.
An assessment of what?
Vulnerability assessment of some of the vulnerable populations. You know how we focused on health priority index, even during COVID, 70% of our county falls in that lowest quartile of the highest risk populations. We're going to focus some of these areas in the rural areas where these populations live to see how vulnerable are they to severe heat events, which are going to be more common here in the next 20 years. Severe drought. Wildfires are going to continue. I know there's a lot of work being done in the forests and all that, but we know that statewide, wildfire smoke tends to collect in the bowl here. You also got to look at the non-native mosquito species that we thought weren't going to be here, staying here. We've got to monitor that and see what type of diseases, if they start carrying some diseases that aren't native here. So there's a lot of areas that we've got to focus on that we've got to see how vulnerable some of these populations are to some of these issues with these climate impacts that are coming in the next 20 years, these severe weather changes.
So Supervisor Pacheco, they might say, after studying Fresno County weather in the month of August, that we need a cooling center for 175 grand. I'm saying if you need a cooling center in Kerman or Mendota, you can just come before this board, and I would help you with your cooling center. And it talks about cooling centers in the prospectus for this whole thing. So to me, I've got a couple of issues with that.
Yep.
How about the stakeholders? You mentioned the universities. Of course, they'll study anything because that's what universities do. But what about these other stakeholders? In the documents attached to the item, it talks about some of the CBOs that have kind of a sketchy resume in Fresno County. And so, can you go over some of those?
We'll be looking at just kind of what their studies are saying and what their reports are saying. That goes back to the compare and contrast some of the studies that are being done. So they're working on some studies in the city of Fresno. They haven't completed them, as I understand.
Yeah, there is the project. I'm going to read a sentence. The project is focused on building climate resilience in the city of Fresno. Okay. through a community-driven process seeks to fortify Fresno's local efforts to adapt to climate change and for true health equity and racial justice. So I love University of Merced. Here's what happens. The CBO wants money. There's this grant the state's offering. We need to partner with University of Merced. University of Merced makes that decision in under 30 seconds. They don't care. They'll study anything. They'll agree to a grant to study anything. So we have some great partners like UCSF, community hospital. They're all willing to be a part of this, but they don't care because it's not their money. They're just signing on to it. CBOs get the money to go out and tell us that we need a cooling center in Mendota when it's over 100 degrees. I don't need to spend 175 grand on that. And so I don't know what my colleagues' thoughts are. Some of these Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, Fresno Building Healthy Communities, the same group we're pretty familiar with. So I think everybody knows where I'm at, and I'm open up to hear what my colleagues have to say.
Supervisor Maxig.
So again, thank you for being here. A couple questions I have with this particular study, because again, it was brought up earlier that right now we're in an environment where we're charged. Half of our electorate wants to move one direction, half the other. And so I never want to get government put in the middle where we're picking sides. So everything that we do needs to be evidence-based, and we need to be defensible. But I do have some questions because it really gets to the heart of, what we stand for as a county. And again, you will recall that 5 years ago we prepared mission, vision, value statements for what we stand for as a county. One of the things that we clearly pointed out is that agriculture is at the heart of what we do here in Fresno County. It's the #1 industry. And then two, looking at these groups want to kind of study the effects of forest fires. And so, that's noble. I can kind of tell you people with asthma are impacted. People who don't have any kind of lung issues can develop them because of the significant amount of particulate matter in the air and pollution that just fires produce. And then two, the climate is changing. I'm up here telling you, just based upon what I'm seeing, the rain events that we're getting, we'll get a lot of rain, a lot of snow, and then we're in the middle of drought. So I do have to ask a question, just looking at what we stand for as a county, the partners that we're getting ready to partner with on this, do our partners support preserving and expanding agriculture, and do they have a history of fighting to protect our agricultural economy? That's number one.
Talking about the UCSFs and all those?
Well, any of the nonprofits that are going to come together to be involved with this. So that's one. Number two is, do our partners support thinning, logging, grazing, and also controlled burning of our forests? And the reason that I mentioned those things is UC Berkeley even supports doing those things, but there are groups out there trying to stop any kind of work in our forests. So any of our partners, in my opinion, need to support these common sense practices that even universities like UC Berkeley also endorses too. And then finally, do our partners support expanding water storage? Now, this can be above ground, it can be below ground, it can be repurposing water basins, and do they have really a history of doing these things? And if the answer is no, a concern I have is different groups out there have a different agenda, where they're interested in studying issues, but they don't want to get to the heart of the matter to make things better. And then sometimes these studies can be used as a wedge to stop us from doing the very things to help prevent more forest fires. And a concern I have with agriculture, and again, I'm like up here we have two experts on agriculture, but just a statistic I heard recently is that over the course of the next 10 years, up to 50% of the lands that we farm are going to have to be fallowed because of SGMA. So to me, what we need to be doing right now is figuring out a way to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and develop more storage and conveyance systems so our farmers can keep farming, because that is at the cornerstone of our economy. So I throw that information out, and if you can't tell me that our partners support these things, this is at the core of who we are here in Fresno County, and if they don't support these things, then I can't support this process moving forward.
We haven't awarded any funding to any of the CBOs to do this yet. I mean, so the only one I could refer to is whoever's on the Fuerta. So I haven't heard of them being against ag or anything like that on UCSF Fresno or CRMC or the Madera Medical Society. But
Okay. Any other comments from the board? No. Does any member of the public wish to address this item? Seeing none, Director, I have no issue with the topic of this. However, if we're going to do it, then I would tend to agree with my colleague Supervisor Brandow. We keep it in-house. We don't need to go out and do all that. And because it's presented to go out, I would not support this item as well. So with that, do I have a motion if you want to decline, or how do you want to do it?
I would like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Because it is a grant, so we don't have to go get it.
Yeah, I want to make a
We have
motion
enough
to,
work as well, yeah.
for sure, to reject this item.
Yeah, so we have a motion from Supervisor Brandow to not move forward with the grant. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Supervisor Magsig. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Director.
so